today we're going to talk about talent acquisition. Today, there are more than 10 million open positions in the US and 5 million people looking for work. Your company is not only competing for those in play, but for top talent that could be convinced to consider a new opportunity. So we called in an expert. My guest is Chrisanne Bowden, Senior HR Consultant at iHire, a leading platform that brings candidates and employers together in 57 industry-focused communities. iHire connects more than 103,000 hiring organizations with over 17 million active and passive job seekers quickly, easily, and cost-effectively. Chrisanne, we're excited to have you with us today. Welcome.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
All right, so we're going to start right off. Let's start at the beginning. A company has a key open position. The business, of course, is looking for the best candidates. Walk us through your best practices so that you get the right high performers to stop and consider the opportunity and then engage with you.
Sure. Good question. And that's a question, unsurprisingly, I do get from time to time. One of the things I think employers need to really focus on is, as important as that key position might be, don't rush to get a job post out before you've kind of done your homework first. I really want to make sure that whoever is in charge of hiring this individual, maybe even be your senior leadership team, is spending some time like hashing out what they really want and identifying the core key components we need from that individual. That gives me a chance to do a little research on, how we might want to find that person. While that's going on, one thing I like to do, and I'm sure that the marketing folks out there hate me saying this, but I like to engage marketing too, just to take a kind of big picture look on what would it look like if you were a top performer in an organization who was sort of getting an inkling that maybe now was a good time to look, and how would they be viewing us if it was really an individual that would be the person we would be hoping to draw to our organization. So, as much as we are in the HR world pretty good at identifying trends and what employees are looking for, no one really does it as well as marketing people. And they'll find some things and help us hone our job post to, be geared towards what that definition of our top performer we're looking to bring on board might look like and how we can find them.
I love that, because if you can partner with the people who can best tell the story, I suspect you're going to get the right people to engage.
That's correct.
That's exactly what you want. So marketing teams, Chrisanne is all for you. So earlier in 2023, some of the largest tech giants announced layoffs. Google, Microsoft, really good companies that employ smart, talented individuals. And I think I read, about 50,000 total. And I think there's certainly more to come. Around the same time, the airline industry reportedly grounded planes almost for an entire day due to technology issues. So is it a viable expectation for companies to target or encourage those from other industries to apply? And are you seeing that as an opportunity for companies today?
I think that's been going on quite a bit. You mentioned early 2023, and we know that there's been a big upheaval with a lot of large organizations. But even during the COVID era, we were starting to see a lot of career jumpers. People who'd been doing something, the easiest example of that were the teachers and the nurses. So how can employers benefit from something like that? And now we see we could maybe consider the next wave of that, right? Where people who worked for an airline or a big tech company find themselves out of work, and after going through what they went through, maybe will feel like they want to try something new. It's a good opportunity to realign skill sets. So one of the things that I talked to an individual just last week, actually, who was doing sales in software, and he explained how beneficial it was for him to hire teachers, because a big part of selling software is helping your buyer have a good, clear understanding. And, as much as I've done recruiting for many, many years, and you can look at me, you can tell I'm not new at this. I had never made that particular connection. We were aligning teachers with customers, customer service type work and things like that. But he did explain that they were really adept at learning the ins and outs of the software and explaining it to people. So, you know, um, you have to look at what transferable skills might come when somebody leaves the airlines.
I
Um,
think that's really strategic, right?
mhm.
Because teachers, there has been a mass exodus
Yes, there has.
post-pandemic,
Yeah, and I'm not
and
going to be surprised that we don't keep seeing this with the airlines too, because of the stress level. But what's the benefit to any organization who has maybe some particular roles that do also have high stress levels? So we
absolutely,
know those individuals kind of have the grit to be able to handle people sometimes. So,
they absolutely do, and I
mhm,
think eh, people are burnout
mhm,
from the pandemic, and I do think the good that will come out of this is that people are really thinking about their purpose and where they want to put their energy and their
mhm.
time and their talent. And people are thinking differently about their careers. And I love the idea that employers should also think differently
Yep,
about the talent that they bring in the door. So
correct.
you are a strategist. And one of the things that I talk about all the time with my executives that I coach is strategic agility is absolutely
Mhm,
necessary as you continue to ascend in the organization. That means for
mhm.
HR, for any mid to senior level executive position. So, as someone who sits in that senior level seat, how can HR think more strategically about finding and encouraging top talent to apply? Um,
Mhm.
thinking about so let me just tee that up and send it over to you. What do you think about when you think about strategically encouraging employers to do that?
I think the most important thing when you're looking for top talent, so those high performing individuals, they know their worth. But I also think that leadership in organizations sometimes feels that throwing money in
Mm,
their direction is what's going to entice them. And that era of a salary being the only thing that's going to draw somebody to your organization is way over. So you can promote your culture, you can promote your DEI initiatives, you can offer top tier benefits, et cetera. If you're not backing it up, that top talent will find out. So we do see people, I think, focusing more and more on what's this organization like that I'm going to? What are their values? I have had candidates for high level positions talk to us about where we're donating money as an organization.
mm,
Where does that go? What does that look like? And it's not that they're trying to find a gotcha thing on it. They just want to get a flavor for what does this company stand for. Do we do community events? Are we really hands on, or do we just strike big checks to big nonprofits? So those are the kinds of things you really want to take a good look at and put some planning into, and do that convincing with your leadership team that it's not just about it's not just about us being in the 75 percentile tier of salaries across the board. You can be in the 50 percentile, but if you're proving that you're a good organization that values your employees, who's giving back to the community, et cetera, that's typically something that gets you ahead of time, and it gets you ahead. And I don't hesitate when I make what I know is a really good hire. Wait a couple of months and just ask them to put 30 minutes on their calendar and talk to them. Like, what made you decide to come here? But even over and above that, did we live up to that?
mhm,
Did we live up to that expectation? And you want to be encouraging with them to be really honest about, did we live up to it? Because
mhm.
if there was an area we didn't, then that's where I know we need to make some improvements and work.
Yeah, and I guess that really lends to the topic of onboarding and retention within organizations. Because there is a lot of effort now put into the front end of hiring. It really it could become a very transactional process if companies don't engage in the right way. And you actually recommend, maybe segmenting might be too strong of a word, but if you have a really good candidate, and let's say you have a, you know, 10, 20, 50, 1,000 people apply. We heard that yesterday. Someone said, yeah, there's some companies, they get 1,000 apply for a position. How do you recommend a company engages with the top talent that they really want to see get in the door?
Gotcha. Well, you're not going to like the answer because the answer is it is some work. Um, as much as I'm with a SaaS company and believe in and love tech, there is a little bit of manual work that goes into something like that at one point. Um, First of all, anybody who knows me knows one of my catchphrases is onboarding begins at the job post. So I do always encourage, like, really make sure you're reviewing your job post template every 3, 4, 5 months. What's changed? What are we reading that maybe we want to make sure we add, or do we want to change the language in our DEI initiatives a little bit to make sure it's covering everything now? So that's an important piece of advice. But from there, we have such great tech tools to help us vet through candidates. And you're right. We do put job posts out there that we get hundreds of applies. And the reality is I can't spend 10 minutes on every resume. There's
Mm-hmm.
just not enough hours in the day and not enough hands on deck to do that. So, um, you need to rely on whatever tech you have available to you to help kind of narrow that down to candidates who at least are reasonably um, qualified. Now, from there, every resume, in my opinion, gets a set of eyes, whether it's myself or someone else, for at least briefly. Just because there may be something on there that helps them stand out to you that you might not have caught otherwise. And it's okay for the ones that you look at and you can tell, yeah, this is not going to be a fit, to just use one of your template reply features. But from there, when I narrow it down to what I like to say is probably my top 8, 9, 10% that I really want to make contact with. I do have templates, but I go in and I edit the template. And it doesn't take as long as it sounds, but you've looked at the resume, you've spent that time, you pull up that template. I like to add a line, and you can customize your template to make this easy,
Mm-hmm.
like with a blank space in there already, to say, I saw in your resume you've previously worked for an organization that does XYZ, whatever that aligns with your job. Or I would really be interested in hearing more about what led you from an education major down the field of human resources.
Mm-hmm.
When a person gets something like that, they know you read their resume, and it does stand
Right.
out to them. And it definitely, if they've got 3 or 4 companies and you're the only one that's customizing your response, that matters. The other thing I would tell you, if you get that candidate that just knocks your feet out from under you, there's one thing that nobody remembers anymore, and that's that we do have a telephone. Now, nobody's going to answer, okay? If they get an unsolicited call from a
Sure.
number, like in my case, it's from Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, and people are like, what the heck? Who's trying to
Uh,
sell me something? Um,
right.
but you can still leave a voicemail and do the same kind of thing. Hey, Berta, I got your resume today, and I am so intrigued to hear about what led you down the coaching path. If I could get a few minutes on the schedule, that would be great. I'd love to hear a little bit more and talk to you and learn a little bit more about you. I've also sent you an email to make it easy to reply. Honestly, more often than not, people call me back pretty quickly, but sometimes people are
Mhm.
just more comfortable with the email. It just gives them that heads up to look for it and why you're looking for them. I find a really good success ratio with my top talent when I really just focus on them personally, make sure they know that I did read their resume.
I love that because in speaking of marketing, in the marketing world, personalized messages at one point
Mhm.
were 11 times more likely to be read and 4 times more likely to be acted upon.
Yep.
And so bringing that into the recruiting world is absolutely a necessity if you want to stand out from the competition, because you have to remember, if they're looking, they're probably considering other options as well, right?
Right. Hmm.
Okay. So if you think about diversity,
Hmm.
equity, and inclusion when it comes to recruiting, that's one area where most companies are looking to improve, right?
Yep.
And one of the most pronounced pieces of data that I found in my research is that companies are hiring for diversity, then expecting those very individuals to adhere to what I call
Hmm.
entrenched rules of conformity. thus
Right.
mitigating the very value that they bring to the organization.
Hmm.
Meaning we're hiring them, but then expecting them to conform to the culture or to the actions or to the values and behaviors of the organization. So give us your expert thoughts on how companies can increase their chances with diverse candidates, not just in hiring, but retention as well.
Sure. Well, obviously your diversity initiatives need to be well thought out, well prepared. So you're working with your leadership team within your organization, but you're also getting feedback and engagement from your staff in general. I would say, at iHire, what we have is we have it's called the Idea Committee. It's a diversity and inclusion committee, and people from all over the organization are part of that. And we then engage with our senior leadership team. A lot of the folks on our diversity committee are diverse themselves.
Mm,
So they're able to give some feedback in a really safe way that helps us define and drive those initiatives and make them very public within the organization and externally too.
mm.
But Bert, I have to say, I think you said something in your remarks there that really stands out. We have used the phrase culture fit for so long, right?
Mm,
And what that means is, are you going to come into our organization and act like everyone in our organization? This is who we are. For example, at iHire, we're a pretty casual company. When we're in offices, there's really no expectation of business attire or anything like that. There are people who come from cultures that wouldn't feel natural to them.
right.
Um, they may feel more appropriate in a button down shirt and ironed khaki pants and polished shoes. And if they walk into the office and people start saying, "Oh, we're not like that here at iHire. You don't have to, we're not like that." If that's the culture, then you're asking the person to not be who they are.
Hmm.
That's a real simplistic example, but there's even more complex ones that I think organizations, when you're looking for not a culture fit, but a culture add. So, how can this person bring some new things to us, teach us new ways to be? Is it a communication style? Is it a focus that they may have that comes from their culture? One of the things that I learned recently doing a DEI training was organizations
Mm,
may want to look really closely at their bereavement leave policies. Why do I say that? In some cultures, families are very small, family circles are very small, actual blood relatives, but there's a circle of community people that are very involved with somebody perhaps from birth. And if one of those individuals passes away, we require the person to use PTO. But to them, this is like immediate family. This is my aunt, so to speak. But because they're not a blood relative, they're not treated the same. I have seen many organizations add to their bereavement policies close personal friends of the family.
that's an interesting thought because
Hmm.
that is really pulling the thread of diversity into your organization and
Hmm.
really harkens back to the question around retention, right?
Hmm.
Because if I had to use maybe some of my PTO, and let's say I already used my PTO, and this person was incredibly close to me,
Hmm.
that's something where I could either become much more loyal to the organization or not
Right.
as a diverse candidate.
Exactly.
I love that. That's definitely, and I love the culture add instead of becoming the culture because you're absolutely right. We aren't really, most organizations really have the best intentions in
Mhm.
mind when it comes to diversity, but we don't really know how to treat people once they're in our organizations in
That's
order
right.
to leverage the value that they bring to the organization.
Mhm.
So let's keep talking about diversity. So I was reading, I think it was last year, there was a Wall Street Journal article that today 1.5 times the number of women are graduating college than men.
Mhm.
And through some of the research, I also found that more Black women are graduating college than ever before in
Mhm.
history. So women are entering the workforce. They're a force,
Mhm.
but they also have headwinds when they head into today's workplaces, which
Yeah.
is why my book, I think, has been so helpful to women across the globe. So, as an expert and as an executive woman who also mentors women in the
Mhm.
workplace, what advice would you give to women who are considering the next opportunity or thinking about applying for a job, maybe that they feel is a little bit of a stretch?
Sure. Um, well, first and foremost, you just used the word mentor, which is my absolute favorite word. I do think women need to learn to ask for mentors and be mentors. Um, frankly, I think that women are great at it. And I've seen some powerful things happen, but I don't think that is necessarily something that happens as naturally as happened with men. Men don't necessarily even just discuss it. It just kind of happens. Where
Hmm.
women, we get busy with our own lives, and we also don't necessarily like to ask for help.
No,
We feel humbled by asking for help, right?
we do.
Like, I should know this. But I also have seen, and I will tell you, I feel this myself. When I get a chance to mentor someone, I grow so much from it too.
You do.
So, you know, looking out there at the women who are maybe 5, 10, 15 years your senior, who they've they're further down the path than you are.
Mhm.
You can definitely look to them to partner with you. Um, and I've even seen some organizations create mentoring circles for women. So maybe it's small teams within a specific part of the company, or larger teams where women get together and just talk about what their hope streams and what maybe some of their hurdles and problems are.
Mhm.
Um, and we have to remember something really important too. I don't know if you've heard this statistic, but for 8 consecutive years now, um, we have what we're calling like the broken rung syndrome.
Yes. Yes.
So like for every 100 men promoted out of that entry level role, only
Mhm.
82 women are.
Correct.
So every rung of that ladder, that same kind of statistic keeps perpetuating itself. And as you get to the top, it's smaller and smaller.
Hmm.
Within organizations, like, what is it that we're looking for when we pull somebody out of an entry level role into that first management position? And why are we making a decision the way we are? Is it potentially like somewhat of an outdated criteria that maybe could be a little more balanced and make those opportunities more fair for women? We know certain
Hmm.
things about, especially women in entry level jobs who are maybe earlier in their career, really struggling with work life balance. When something like a family emergency happens, they tend to be the one who steps up to take care of it, sick
Hmm.
child, etc. And they're just trying to get through that. But the skill set that they're bringing is really no different than their male counterparts. We just
Hmm.
have to make that transition, that phase of moving from hourly out into a management role, is something wise organizations should really be taking a look at.
Yeah, I was just reading something yesterday that an organization found that they had this diversity initiative, and a lot of women of color were coming in at the entry level, but they weren't being promoted.
Hmm.
And what they found was that there was a huge dichotomy between the skill set that they brought to the organization and what's required at the next level. And
Hmm.
so they implemented a training program, and
Hmm.
they saw an 83% increase in the number of women
It's incredible.
applying for that next level job. And let's go back to a point that you made, because I think it's so important for those in HR to continue to remember and be reminded of this, is that women sometimes need permission to promote themselves,
Hmm.
whereas men naturally have this ability to really
Hmm.
put themselves out there and take the risk.
Yeah.
And sometimes women think that they have to leave the organization in order to get that next promotion,
Hmm.
or to really find that level that they feel that they're aspiring towards, or they know that they can perform at. They just don't think that they have the opportunity in the organization. Sometimes you just have to ask.
Have to ask, let them
Mhm.
know that you're looking for that too. And I think a key thing for any organization that's focused on diversity initiatives and turnover is, if you're not creating that safe culture for somebody to talk to their manager about what they want to see themselves doing next year or the year after, you're
Mhm.
creating turnover and you're not supporting your DEI initiatives. But guess what? You mentioned it earlier. DEI is so huge right now. If
Mhm.
you have a young Black woman on your staff who is looking for a new job title within the next couple of years, a promotion type situation, if you aren't making that happen for her in whatever way, I love the training concept. I love that
Mhm.
statistic you just shared. Um, but if you're not doing it, someone's looking for her. I'll
And they will
guarantee you
hire
that.
her.
Yeah.
Yes, they will. And
Hmm.
you know what? She somebody at some point is going to tell her what she's worth and that
Mhm.
she does have potential and that she can
Yep.
ascend in the organization. Because, when you look at an individual who typically is successful, there's a personality trait, but there's
Mhm.
also ambition.
Mhm.
And when I coach outperformers, that's the one thing that I look for before I decide to coach anyone is, do they have the ambition for
Mhm.
more? Do they want more and do they think they deserve more? And that doesn't mean
Yeah.
that it's not at that point about humility or
Mhm.
even thinking that they're better than anyone. They just need to have that inside of them.
Yeah. I'll tell you a little story. Probably 20 years ago, I was having, back when we only did annual reviews
Right,
with
right.
with a VP of HR that I had a great relationship with, and he was going through this, and the review was going very well. Um, but I could kind of catch this tone that, he was just praising me for what I was doing.
Mm,
And I unfortunately didn't come up in an era where girls were treated the same as boys. But
right.
at the end of my review, he said, "Is there anything you want to say to me?" And it took every ounce of courage I had in me. And I said, I am an ambitious person.
Oh,
And it took a lot, but it was that I think he felt like I was excelling in my job. And so, boy, she must be
right,
very happy.
right.
And no, I am happy, but also I would like to see what's next.
That
And
doesn't mean that you're content.
right. Correct.
And so
Yeah.
how did he respond to that?
With a little bit surprised,
Sure.
but, again, I had a great relationship, and I would say it was probably within a couple of days, he found the opportunity to just sit down and say, you brought this up, so let's map out what that looks like." And it actually, I think I surprised a lot of people when I said, "Yeah, I'll relocate." "Really?"
Wow.
Just the concept that a woman would be willing to pack herself up and move to a new region of the country, um, all alone. I think they just presumed I wouldn't wanna do that, and I said yes to the next opportunity that was from Ohio to Maryland, and I never looked back.
Wow. That's a great story and
Yeah,
a great
yeah,
story of courage. Women do need the courage to
right.
ask and to put the foot forward and
But
say
it gives
sometimes
Yeah, and the point is I shouldn't have had to say that, right?
you
Like, he should
shouldn't.
have asked me, and I hope that we're here now, but that could be some management training opportunities too within the organization is, what are
Mhm.
you actually when you're having your one-on-ones with your folks, can you walk out of there knowing what their career goals are?
Right. Right. And not
Yeah.
be offended, right?
Mhm.
Because there's a lot of ego that occurs at the executive level. And we have to set that
Yeah.
aside as executive leaders and say, you know what? It is my job and my honor to be able to develop these people,
Mhm.
both for the organization and for themselves,
Yeah.
and align
Correct.
them to the strategy. So that's your fundamental job as an
Mhm.
executive and as a leader.
Most
So
definitely.
we have a lot of individuals from HR that are listening, and a lot of them want to continue to ascend in the
Mhm.
organization. And I suspect, like you, HR houses some of the most incredible talent
Yeah.
within an organization. They have such fantastic transferable skills. They're great leaders. They know exactly how to live the culture of the organization and bring the best out in others. There's even some CHROs that are being considered for CEO positions today.
I'm not surprised.
So, for that HR audience, what advice would you give them if they're trying to ascend or expand their sphere of influence or acquire
Mhm.
new skills? How can they maybe blend more strategic thinking with driving results, maybe as it relates to recruiting?
Sure. Well, I would say first of all, and recruiting is definitely kind of like its own lane in the HR world.
Mhm.
But one of the best experiences I ever had that I think took me from you know, a 5 to a 9, if you were doing a scale of 10 in HR, is having an opportunity in one of the organizations I was with to really work cross-departmentally. So
Mm,
to take because, organizations are siloed, and then at one point I found myself in an organization that was about as opposite of siloed as anything could ever be. And
mm,
I had opportunity, it was in the hospitality field. I had opportunity to sit in with facilities maintenance. I had opportunity to sit in with the IT tech support people. I had opportunity to sit in with food and beverage staff and the chefs, and I could go on. Um, to this day, I reference so much knowledge that I got from the opportunity to not just be there's HR over there, but to sit in
Mhm.
these meetings and learn how, you know, the heating and cooling system of a very large building worked.
Yeah.
And and you mentioned recruiting, and like I say, I said I pulled on this stuff still to this day because I have such a deeper understanding. But from a higher level strategic HR, it's so powerful within the organization
Mhm.
when those of us who really are dealing with the people across the board have a good understanding of what they do. It also makes us more accepted as we have to step into interactions with, management, because of now we have a new performance management system. Let me talk to you about it.
Mhm.
Um, they know we're interested in what they're doing.
Right.
Totally admit I'm in a software as a service company now, so some of that stuff is like, but
Right, right.
I can tell you how that HVAC system works. So
There you go. There you
mhm.
well, it lends to credibility, right?
Right,
I mean, how do you have
exactly,
the right to come tell me how to lead my organization or
right,
inspire my people or generate a culture if you really don't know what the jobs are?
right,
Yeah.
absolutely.
All right. Are you ready for some rapid fire questions?
Throw them at me.
All right. Here we go. In the last 5 years, what new belief, behavior, or habit has most improved your life?
Oh, this is a very profound one for me.
Okay.
Silence. So I have begun seeking opportunities to find silence. Um, I can't remember the title of the book, but I read a book a few years ago that talked about the power of boredom and
Hmm.
how boredom, as we see it, actually helps to rewire our brain and helps it kind of clean out. It's a little bit like sleep, helps it clean out a lot of the clutter.
Wow.
And I'm fortunate, I live on a small farm. And so when I have the opportunity to take any kind of mini break during the day,
Hmm.
I walk outside. I don't have electronics, I don't have earbuds. I just walk outside. I might even do like a menial chore or something. When I'm home alone, there's no radio or television, it's silence. And
Hmm.
I really have felt myself become a much less stressed person by embracing silence.
I love that. I've
Mhm.
never heard that before. What is one of the best or most worthwhile investments that you've made in your career?
Okay. That's another one that's kind of like um, best most worthwhile investment I've made in my career is mentoring.
Mm.
Um, I definitely would say I had good mentors early on in my career. I could have used more, but it wasn't, I
Mhm.
think, as much a thing during my, I guess the last 20 years of my career. I've been very active in looking for people who were interested in somebody to help lift them up to the next level. Frankly, I've mentored HR pros and I've mentored people completely outside of the arena, just where are you in life? Let's get you to where you want to be, kind of thing. And it's really empowering when you start to see the change that happens in people when somebody's just saying, hey, you know what? My job here is to be your person.
Mhm.
I'm your person. I get nothing out of this, but what growth and an opportunity comes for you and what well-being comes for you. And for me personally, it's brought such a sense of satisfaction and well-being and really good feelings that I'm doing something right in this life. Because there are people, I think there's probably 10 or 12 people that if you mentioned my name, they'd say she mentored me.
Mhm.
So,
I love that.
mm.
What's the biggest challenge the industry is facing today? And I would say the HR industry.
I think that this has been happening for maybe a bit, and I almost see that we may become a broader scope of HR than where people kind of are even more specialized. So many companies are switching to focusing on HR with analytics.
Hmm.
And then the other side of us is focused on culture. And I think both are incredible. And of course, by the way, we're still doing all the payroll and stuff.
Keeping the
Both are
whole
incredible.
organization
And
running. Yeah.
yeah, both are incredible and powerful things. But how do you avoid one taking over the other? How do you marry them to get truly the best results? Because analytics can just look like that really cold,
Hmm.
these are the numbers prove things out, where people who are really focused on culture are saying, but your employees are not engaged.
Hmm.
So where's the disconnect? And I think, keeping both at an even pace with the other and not letting one override the other
Hmm.
is probably a big challenge that we all need to be aware of.
Yeah, absolutely. What company do you study as a best practice in HR for company culture?
For company culture, I kind of stay in the SaaS industry.
Hmm.
So companies that get really great cultural ratings, like best places to work type insignias, like GitHub, Slack, Mailchimp. Um, they're good organizations for me to go to, as far as like who's bringing what to the table and who's doing what, that's keeping their top performers satisfied and
Hmm.
attracting the new best talent. That advice, though, is going to apply industry to industry. I think one of the things that employers remember a few years back when everybody's like, well, we can't be Google,
Right.
see how that worked out. Um, but if you're in healthcare, what GitHub and MailChimp are doing is probably not going to align with what you need. If you're in higher ed, you might be able to offer free tuition for the family. That's not something that iHire can offer. If you're in manufacturing, a lot of the workplace flexibility type things aren't going to come into play. But when you see, you know, best places to work in manufacturing, what are they doing? You have to
Mhm.
sort of make sure it aligns with what you do, because if not, there's certain things you're just going to throw your hands up and say, we can't be them because we can't
Right.
have people work remotely. Well, who's offering what? Because somebody's out there winning, and that's who you want to look to for your guidance.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's a golden ticket right there. How do you advise HR get the credibility and place at the table they so deserve?
Oh boy, there's a lot of ways to do that. First of all, we're not HR of yesteryear. We do, as I mentioned earlier, we do have to do the day-to-day task oriented stuff,
Mm.
the compliance things, the onboarding, offboarding, that's there. But we need to be defining ourselves, and we need to be doing so strategically as far as what happens to the bottom line when HR is performing well, when HR is doing their job well, and how organizations are best going to capitalize on that. And, you know, I think how you do that, it's really going to depend on where you're starting.
Mhm.
I've walked into organizations where the culture was really poor, turnover was high. And in a situation like that, you kind of have to start with the numbers. What is the cost of turnover? Sit down and do the math and take it to leadership and say, I think if I had our cost of turnover last year, for example, was, $280,000. But if I had a budget of 50, I could really reduce that and save
Mhm.
you a lot of money. So
Mhm.
if that's where the organization is, and, then the next step, the company that's doing okay, but maybe they don't have any diversity, et cetera, it's bringing to them like, what is going to benefit here? Where are we going to win by
Mhm.
having this? And then finally, you have that high performing organization, but why aren't we shooting for the stars? And here's some ideas and suggestions. There has to be a positive outcome, or you're not going to earn credibility. So you have to put the work in, but you have to, as we say in mentoring, you have to meet them where they are
Yes.
and formulate your plan from there.
Yes. I think that is such sound advice because I think a lot of times HR feels shafted at the table,
Hmm.
but I think the C suite looks to them and says, okay, what ideas are you bringing to the table to fix what our pain
Right.
points are today?
Right.
And then come back to the table and tell them about your successes. That's where I always see the communication loop is left open
Hmm.
and they never get the credit that they deserve. because they
Right.
need to come back to the table and share their successes.
Yeah. The respect comes after the results.
There you go.
Mm.
There you go. HR, there's your biggest tip for the day. Well, and so that leads into my last question. What's the one key takeaway that you'd leave with our audience today?
One key takeaway to leave with the audience, you know, keep trying. Keep an eye on who you look like to the population, whether it's your internal workforce or the candidates you're trying to draw in. Just keep trying new things. There's no right way to do everything. The world's evolving so fast, right? I stated earlier, I think some statistics from 2019, and that feels like so long ago, and things have changed so much.
They have.
And, we have to be able to keep adapting and changing as we go along with what our practices are to be able to come out on the winning side of being an employer and attracting top talent.
We do. And HR is at the forefront today. And now's the opportunity. You have the stage. You're there if you want it. Do
Mhm.
something with it and take your organization to new heights.
Yeah,
They're ready for you. They're completely ready for you. How can our
absolutely.
audience find out more about you and your company?
Well, first of all, my company website is www.ihire.com. We do have an employer, like HR services page tab that tells you a little bit more about what I do and what we do. Other than that, my LinkedIn profile is out there, and you could definitely look me up, see what my background is, and contact me that way if you're interested in just chatting more.
Fantastic. Chrisanne, it has been such a pleasure to have you.
Same. Anytime.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you so much. I really hope you enjoyed this episode. Thanks so much for watching. We would love it if you shared your thoughts on any of the topics we discussed in the comments below. And if you got value from the video, it would mean the world to us if you hit the like button and subscribe to the HR Morning channel. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Voices of HR.